All right, so I think we are getting ready to get started here today. We are very glad that you could join us for the third in a series of what we call Ed Market 101. And we've had several, one on how do you know if your product is ready for the school market, and the last one 2 weeks ago was on how do you know who your real customer is. And this one is sort of a follow-up, and that is on effectively reaching your customer. We've got a new group of presenters, and we'll find out from them a little bit about what they do and who they are in a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and go through some announcements because this will take just a few minutes, but that will also give a few more people time to get logged in and to be ready both in viewing the slides and in listening to us. So just a bit about SIIA. Most of you on the call know about SIIA, but as you know, if you don't, we are a principal trade association, and we have about 800 or 900 members now with all of our divisions, but the Ed division serves at least, it's about 180, maybe a couple more than that, member companies, and you are the folks that provide technologies to K-12 or post-secondary markets that address their needs. We've got a number of initiatives that you can join if you are a member. We've got sort of a membership programs committee, a market data and analysis committee, technical and development, global strategies, games for learning. Those are all groups that get together and help decide what kind of deliverables, what kind of initiatives we should take on in those areas. And the working groups like Games for Learning is a short term. They get together to do some deliverables, serve a certain purpose, and then they tend to sunset. Whereas global technical development, market data, for example, have new things to do every year. So they've been in existence almost 10 years now that I've been here at SIIA. The Education Industry Summit will be a committee. If you are a member and you would like to help determine the program and help select and find speakers, you should go ahead and you should let me know or let Derby know, and we will get you on that committee. As I said, we've got two key conferences coming up. One is our business forum in New York. You can go there now to sia.net/etbf, and you can see under Look Who's Coming under networking, and you'll see the 100 and some people that are registered already. And it's really about business. It's all about raising revenue, raising profitability, and particularly helping some of the innovation incubator groups find investment or partner companies. Our industry summit is always in May, always in San Francisco, and it's a little bit broader in terms of its purpose. This year I think we're going to be talking about innovation in a very broad sense. If you have any interest in joining SIA because you're not yet a member, we would love for you to reach out to Eric Friedel, and he'll be happy to give you all of the really great reasons you should join. One of them being you get to work with the Education Division team here in DC. We have I have 4 other people that really help with all of our education initiatives. You can see me there, Karen Billings. But LaDuke is a program manager here and responsible for webinars and member communication and a number of things. And she's sort of at the controls here for the webinar. Lindsay is our market and policy analyst, and she's busy working on our market reports and mobile interviews and state initiative reports and all kinds of things that you can get, including our Common Core monthly updates if you are a member. Mark Schneiderman is our Senior Director for Education Policy, and he's our guy on the Hill lobbying for more funding and helping determine a lot of thought leadership that we do in our government affairs. Jonathan is on the call. He's actually going to be writing up some of our the information today so that we have a nice short summary of what is contributed. And he also gets out the EdTech Daily every day, so we really appreciate that. Also, we have finished both our PK-12 market report is available for sale, and so is the higher ed market report. We have closed the 2012. That will be available shortly, and then we're going to be emailing a lot of you, asking you to fill out the 2013 market survey. By giving us this information, you get a free $1,500 report, and we think it's a really, really great report. If you want more information about it, just go ahead and let me know. Our Cody nominations by the companies closed a few weeks ago, and we're now looking for judges. So if you have anybody in mind that would be a great judge, the first round judges must be affiliated with an education institution as an educator, substitute teacher even, administrator, directors of technology, whoever. We need them to really look at the products as a user, and their votes will really determine who the finalists are and pretty much 80% of the score. So these are really key people. I look at them every week, all those that have applied, and with just hundreds and hundreds of nominations, each one needing several 2 to 3 judges. We end up needing 500-600 judges on this. So we need your help finding them. And lastly, we have also closed the last round of application for the Innovation Incubator Program. But we are going to be announcing those come early November. They will be presenting at the Ed Business Forum in New York. Next spring, early spring, January, February, we'll announce another cycle. We've been doing this now for 7 years. And the 10 finalists out of the original, 60, 65, 70 that apply are asked to present at the conference. So again, if as a member you would like to help look at the sort of second round of this, let LaDuke know immediately, because I think those assignments are going out today or tomorrow. So let's get started with today's webinar, Effectively Reaching the Customer in the Education Institutions. And it's going to be moderated by Carmi Paris. And she's an education consultant right now, and she spends a lot of time with Novation. But when I first got to know her, I think she was part of Riverdeep. And I think we're going back 10 years, which is now, of course, part of Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. She moved on to SchoolNet and was there for several years and directed their strategic planning. That, of course, is now part of Pearson. And then she went to Spectrum K-12 School Solutions, and she did a lot of corporate development and partnership work for them. That was acquired by Scantron. And then, of course, Scantron became Global Scholar, and I think even Carmi, they're talking about going back to Scantron's name. I'm not sure, but she's been a very active board member during time periods, now helping us work on the Alumni Board of Directors. She has been a very, very strong supporter of all of our education initiatives, and so I am going to just let her say hello and then start the webinar and get the other participants to introduce themselves. Carmi, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Karen, and thanks for inviting me to moderate this really very important webinar. Karen mentioned a lot of companies. It kind of reminds me about how really old I am. I have been in the industry for a while, but I've been fortunate enough to work with a number of these companies who have been acquired, which all have been a good thing over the years. And they range from anything from digital curriculum, one of the first LMSs that I was fortunate enough to work on, and to data systems to build out data decision-making platforms and process management platforms for SPED and RTI and adaptive assessments. And the one thing they all had in common was the need for really a strong strategic marketing know-how. It was essential to get to where we were trying to go as companies in our growth and to really sustain our customers. So, and knowing really how do you effectively reach your customer is really a must, regardless of what your company goals are. So for those of you who are current members, this esteemed panel probably doesn't need an introduction. But I do want to say that, really they're not only industry leaders, but they're great mentors in the field of education. So I'm going to just quickly, Charlene, Mark, Joe, and Linda, and we'll do it in that order. Thanks for a bit of a little brief on your marketing expertise and yourself. Charlene?
Thanks so much, Carmi and Karen and SIA. Thanks for organizing today's event. I've been a proud member of SIA for over 15 years, and so I'm glad that we can gather today to share some of what we've learned about effectively reaching customers. At Blohm & Associates, we really focus on 4 different ways to reach customers, and our focus is on the education market and on the special needs market. And the 4 ways that we work with clients are with media relations, with social media, certainly a large and growing component, through thought leadership campaigns that include presentations and speeches and things like that. And then lastly, with content marketing. Once content has been created, how can we cycle that around and share that as much as possible? And that's certainly going to be one of the elements that we're going to be looking at today. Mark?
And hi, my name is Mark Buchholz, and I actually started out in the elementary classroom and then spent about 11 years with in educational publishing with Pearson, Thompson, and McGraw-Hill before being recruited over to 1105 Media and working with the publications THE Journal and Campus Technology. At 1105, we do much of what everybody else does. We're a media outlet that where we really get in and we listen and learn what our clients need. We help them create their strategy, build their plans, and help them develop the content to go to market with, to establish thought leadership, and then further how to nurture the leads and the demand generation efforts that come out of everything that they're doing.
Thanks, Mark. Joe?
Hi, this is Joe Riddle. I basically founded the SmartBrief Education Group, which many of you may know our partnership with ASCD. ASCD SmartBrief reaches about 200,000 educators, and in total, with the rest of our partnerships, we're reaching about 800,000 K-12 educators. All of that is opt-in registrants who receive our newsletter. So I guess the key data I bring to the table is we have a lot of analysis on what types of marketing messages hook different constituents within K-20. What kind of marketing messages teachers respond to versus principals, et cetera. We just launched the SmartBrief for the Higher Ed Leader this week, and we're very pleased to be able to present the higher education market as part of our portfolio.
Thanks, Joe. And Linda?
Well, hi. It's so nice to see so many of you on the phone today. I'm Linda Winter, and I lead the Winter Group here in Denver. We're a team of 15 who create all kinds of marketing materials, both digitally and in print, and often in environmental design, booth, graphics, signage, etc. Really, we're the folks who design and make the things for companies like all of yours to put in front of educators to help folks make decisions.
Great. Thanks, Linda, very much. So we're going to start on our first question that will be coming up momentarily. And really just to set the landscape for today's topic, are education companies reaching different companies now than they reached 5 years ago? If so, why? Maybe we'll just start in the same order for now. Charlene, if you'd like to go first.
Thanks, Carmi. I think one thing that possibly has changed over the past 5 years has been truly there's been an interest in homeschool communications. And I think over the past 5 years, as we've put more and more products up and in the cloud, as we've done more and more flipped learning instruction, I think that parents have at long last started to play an integral role in what we're doing. And so I think our constituent group changes slightly when we start thinking about the fact that mom and dad now have access to information and can actually see some of the instructions that's being provided. I think that's probably new at a bigger level certainly than it was 5 years ago.
Great. Mark?
Yeah, I would agree a lot with what Charlene said, and as well as I think that just the way that the funding essentially is coming down has made it much more complex in education to really find the different stakeholders that are invested. I think the decision-making process that is out there has actually expanded, and it's always been much of more of a committee and community type of decision. But I definitely think that with the way funding is coming down and the way things are happening in the market, it's definitely expanding to include administrators, teachers, and as well as our parents that are out there in the marketplace.
Joe.
Yeah, I would echo both of those. I think the parent market is a huge and growing area that people are paying attention to. And I would just add that I think the distinction between tech marketing and curriculum marketing, for example, has all but disappeared. Those are essentially seamless components of a school environment now, and I think that makes the selling channel more complex, as Mark was saying.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And Linda.
Yeah, I think Joe, to your point, every customer in a building or in a district is a curriculum customer now, and so we have to integrate curriculum-directed messages and information in there. I also think that distributed decision making is really a force to be reckoned with. And I think what that does at this point is, I'm not sure it's different customers, but I think they collaborate more and longer over decisions. The need for things like pilots and trials is certainly more profound. And I think the sell-in, sell-through. So the administrators want teachers to buy in. Teachers don't want to buy in until they know administrators are on board. So I think it just takes more communication more often and more integrated.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, and you have to be so diligent in kind of keeping ahead of the information that's coming in, massive amounts of information that we have to kind of sift through and then share with them. So again, I think I'm going to open this then just to all the panelists, and I'm going to just let you decide, whoever wants to speak first. How do most companies reach their education institution customers today? Does anyone still send print catalogs? Maybe, Linda, you should help us with this one. Do they use Salesforce?
Carmi, I think that depending on the product or the solution or the program, that there still is a role for the catalog. What we're seeing and what we do often is it's a print catalog, it's a digital catalog, and I think educators, just particularly when you're a multi-program, multi-product, when you have multiple products, multiple solutions, educators have to have a quick reference way to get at them. So I think there's still a role for print. I just think it has to be integrated with other collateral, etc. I mean, I think a catalog is kind of a boxed-in way to think about it, but certainly ways for folks to get at product information really quickly depending on where they are, and they are just not always in front of a device or a computer. But sometimes they're not in front of print either. So I think it's not an either or, it's an and.
Linda, are you seeing that different from in higher ed versus K-12?
I think higher ed, particularly in the content areas, in the discipline areas, print still plays a large role, particularly in humanities, and other kinds of content areas. Faculty members still rely on print. I've been amazed at how well in higher ed some print kinds of promotions do. Or email promotions that offer a print follow-on. It still is pretty startling how well that will do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anyone else on the panel? Okay. If you have any questions also, just saw Mike said print is a great way to cut through the noise. Thanks, Mike, and it's good to see you on the phone here on the call.
So I could not agree more. It is a great clutter buster now. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, and I'll open this up to the attendees as well, as if you want to respond to this next question with any of your questions. What's the most challenging aspect of reaching education institution customers? So now the challenges. What are the hurdles?
I'll dive in and I'll speak to the inconsistent funding landscape. I think has been a really challenging aspect for a lot of vendors. And I think the vendors who are best equipped to coach educational institutions about funding streams that they may not even be aware of that they can apply to product purchases are the ones who get the win.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that funding, again, we have to keep so far ahead of it because it seems to always be morphing into something else, doesn't it? Anyone else on the panel that would like to comment on this?
I think, Carmi, this is Linda. I think part of this gets back to an old retail adage that still holds true, and that is folks can't buy your solutions, your programs, your products if you're not on the shelf, and we just don't always know when somebody's going to be hungry for cereal or have money for cereal. But if we are there and we are visible, we are consistent, we are preemptive, so that when they get a sense that they can go after funding or they get funding, etc., you're present. I think your point, Carmi, about being proactive is exactly right. But some of it also is just being consistently visible, consistently present, and consistently nurturing leads. So that's the challenge, and it's not inexpensive to do or easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And then, of course, add competition to and knowing how to message your real position in the marketplace as differentiators. It takes a lot of pre-planning and strategizing with great leaders like yourselves that can help people get through that noise. Anyone else that would like to comment on this? Okay, so we'll move on to 10. So again, to all the panelists and participants, you may want to give us some feedback on your experience. What's unique or different about reaching a variety of different customers, especially administrators versus administrators? Mark, might this be a good question for you?
Yeah, thank you. It's actually a really good question. Because they both have their unique and different ways that we reach them. I think especially looking at education, we always went toward something when I was working in it, especially as in sales and marketing. We really wanted to target those administrators, especially because they're the ones that essentially hold much of the purse strings that are out there. But I think a lot of times we forget that sometimes ground-up efforts can actually work as well. And so also reaching the educators that are in the classroom that are using the technology to get someone excited about it and be a champion is definitely something that sometimes I think we overlook, especially when we look at just a funding bucket and who's actually holding that funding. So I think those are two different unique things. I think there are two different unique messages that go out. I also think that today, especially with everybody thinking about standards-based education and the outcomes that are necessary, I think it's a conversation that happens on both levels. It happens both with the educator and with the administrator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyone else on the panel would like to add to that?
Yeah, I think Mark's absolutely right. I think you need to pay attention to both the bottom up and the top down channel. And it is interesting how different messages will work for different audiences. One thing that we see is that teachers are really responsive to offers for free product license, being able to use a product free for a month or being able to peruse the chapter of a book for free online. That doesn't work so well with principals. Principals seem to be more keyed into themes of ease of implementation in the marketing that they respond to. And then superintendents are still different from that, and they really respond, as far as I can see, only to funding messages, to money. Will this get you access to additional funding or save your district money? So the constituencies are paying attention to slightly different messages about each product.
Thank you. It is really interesting. I think I did see something from Bruce Wilcox, who is asking for what is one example of a ground-up effort that worked. In reaching educators or administrators. Can someone speak to perhaps something that you've done within your company or you've suggested to a company that that may have been an effort that was successful?
I'll jump in here. So I think this is Mark. I think when looking at a ground-up effort, I'm not sure if you're talking about reaching the educators first versus the administrators, but I think the ground-up effort is really truly a unique. Educators love to hear from educators, and so if any time that there is a success story, no matter how small, I think it's so important to highlight that story, to turn that story into and distribute it into as many content channels as possible, whether that's through social media, through developing a case study, a white paper. I think and getting that content out in front of the people, both educators and administrators, I think that, this is talking very broadly, but definitely that's what works, is to be able to figure out what that content is, get that champion, and make sure you tell that story.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and as does Bruce Wilcox, who does say, yes, educators first, and then the institution. So thanks very much. I appreciate that. So Charlene, I'd like to ask you to respond to this first. Can you reach and sell to your customers primarily through an online presence and with social media?
Well, Carmi, I'd have to say that the answer there would be both yes and no. It really is going to depend on what you're trying to sell or what next action step you're hoping is going to move a prospect down the continuum to become, a customer. It's going to depend a lot, I think, then also on your price point. If you're doing freemium, I would say that online and social media can help a great deal to get that initial group involved, and then once you've got that initial group of customers, moving past that and trying to sell the actual paid subscription versions, you're going to have to do some additional marketing channels. I think that the number one thing for us to recognize, as some of the other panelists have already said, is that educators really do like to talk to each other. And so I think the reach in particular is significant in terms of online sales, to engage with customers there, to be in the communities that they're in, to share in the conversations that they're having with EdChat or whatever it would be as the hashtag that you're following via Twitter. And there's certainly a conversation like that that's happening almost every day of the week, and in some states there are specific chats that are happening for math versus science on different nights of the week. And so online, I would say, absolutely is a way to support that, because, again, the personal learning network is really going to be significant in moving folks forward. If we think about the standard buying cycle and how that's evolving, once upon a time we spent basically an entire school year trying to decide through committee meetings and evaluations what we were going to buy. And what we've certainly seen more recently is a question goes out to the personal learning network during a break between classes, during the time that professors are spending in their offices, and they're asking each other the questions, and the answers are coming back fairly quickly. So the time to make the decision has certainly gotten shorter. The money is still being released at around the same time. I think the last thing to think about is that engaging with customers on social media makes a ton of sense. Don't necessarily expect educators in particular to follow your social media channels back. They'll engage with you when they need information, thank you very much, and then they'll probably press on to other things. That's at least been our experience, and monitoring your search engine optimization, monitoring your social media channels can be of great assistance there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Anthony Francis leaves a note for us in the chat box. Says, if online is email direct to a person, yes, otherwise we may simply be creating awareness. So I would assume that awareness is a good thing.
Absolutely, yeah. And then, along the awareness continuum, ultimately there becomes the sale. But the sale is going to happen in the standard school buying cycle, again, depending on the price point of what you're trying to sell. So thinking that you can use online to change the buying cycle is probably not necessarily going to yield the results you're looking for. But engaging customers and building relationships that will support sales later, I think absolutely is a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you go back to the first slide, or when we talk about what's different today than 5 years ago, imagine we wouldn't be having really this conversation at this depth probably with social media, but we've come so far. Anyone else that would like to respond to that before we move on?
Just real quick, as it relates to social media, I think we have seen a big uptick, and I think the conversations that we're having with our customers and engaging the education community is how do we actually now take the interaction that we're having with social media and actually be able to convert that into more of a sales-ready type of lead. And those are conversations that we're actually having with our clients and our customers right now about ways to engage and the most effective ways to engage. And I think we all know that kind of content is king, and the more we can get them to engage and distribute good content, because I think we have a much more sophisticated buyer. And that kind of leads into the next question, I think, Karen, which is, what's the effective demand generation activities? I think everything from social media through. We did a very in-depth survey and a number of focus groups with EdTech marketers to try to really find out what those activities were. And 88% of our respondents came back and said, what really keeps them up at night are demand and lead generation campaigns and lead nurturing, and how to most effectively do that. 41% said that content development is what really kept them up at night. How to really continue to feed that pipeline of really good content to be able to get out and do it effectively and strategically so that their message is unified. So as far as effective demand and lead generation activities, one of the things that came through as a common theme, anytime we can do email marketing, webinars, white papers, developing case studies and advertorials, those are what our EdTech marketers really feel is hitting the market. And so I think we really went out to learn from them what their best practices were to really find out what was more effective in the marketplace.
That's great. And when you refer to a study, is that an internal study that you had done, Mark?
Correct. It was an internal study done by the 1105 Media Education team. And it was led by a couple of outside industry consultants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's yes. It's interesting to really talk about we use the word effective, and that's really what we're looking for, because there's so many different avenues of marketing and reach and PR. You really have to know your customer and your market in order to who that real customer is that you're trying to reach, to be able to direct the correct solutions. So you can't have enough studies. Anyone else that would like to respond to this question before we move on?
Carmi, this is Charlene. I would just jump in and say that I think Mark's analysis is really quite fascinating, and I would say that if the idea is trying to figure out which is more effective, the only way to really answer that question is to measure and measure again. So deploying campaigns without the ability to do the back-end analysis on how people got to your site, what pages did they land on, what did they look at, what did they buy, how many times have they been there. The tools exist for us to do that, and I'll share that one of our clients is in their third school year, of assigning a revenue goal to Pinterest. So again, the only way that they knew that that was going to work was that they did a test, they did a trial. They were seeing lots of sales that they were selling to classroom teachers, but they could see enough sales on that they could then assign revenue goals and indeed throw more campaigns at that. So with the measurement, they could grow that program and grow a nice chunk of revenue in the process.
Yeah, that's a very important point. Thanks, Charlene, for sharing that. You can't have enough, and even at that, you have to watch it, right? Because as soon as you're starting it, there's a point at which you wonder why it might start to dwindle, and what you need to do in order to keep it moving at a good clip for pipeline, to kind of build pipeline and to keep customers interested. I think that's really important. Can anyone else want to talk a little bit about the effectiveness and measurement part of this, and perhaps how tools that have been used for measurement to show effectiveness and success?
I think, Carmi, we really need to revisit conferences and face-to-face events also, because I think one thing that we're seeing a lot, we're seeing conference attendance and trade show attendance grow again. But I think the more the marketing relationship moves digitally, the greater the hunger in a lot of cases for folks to meet face-to-face with the vendors and the partners that they're going to work with. And so I think it's not, and I think Scott Hubert has sent in some things about on the chat line, resources being shared at an event. It's not just being at the booth. It's doing pre-conference and post-conference and afternoon mini sessions and all the things that sort of give you the opportunity for a live face-to-face conversation and collaboration with folks. So those sorts of activities where you can begin to see interest and let people sort of self-select and opt in to say, hey, I'm interested in that, those make better leads, I think.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Linda. That's an important point. I appreciate it. So we'll move on to the next question. And Mark, since you started the last one, I'm going to ask you to start with this one as well. How does content marketing and participation participation in live and virtual events play into the strategy?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Well, Linda actually started to address this because I really think that it does play into the strategy. I mean, I think that education customers are still very relationship oriented. And anytime you can get in front of that customer personally, in order to actually deliver your message and a nice handshake, I think it goes a long way. And so for live events, most definitely, in both K-12 and higher education, I think really play into a key strategy, and really taking a look at those events and who the participants are that are going into those events, I think is a key in really determining, am I going to be seeing my decision maker, my buyer, my influencer at that show. And so there are a lot of wonderful events out there, and I know Linda and Charlene are actually going to talk more about that on the next slide. But I think that is a really key way. Events can get really expensive to actually participate in, live events. And so there is also virtual events. And aside from our webcasts and webinars and different ways that you can engage through content marketing, I think virtual events are another great way to actually start interacting with customers. And there are a number of great, wonderful virtual events that are out there as well, where if you can just get in as a sponsor or even as an exhibitor, you can actually start really working with and setting up those meetings virtually in order to get in front of the people that you need to get in front of.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate that. It is interesting, a lot of us have been in the industry for a long time, have been going to events. I think there is a balance that needs to happen. As Linda said, there's nothing like face-to-face and being with someone and looking at them. But if you can kind of balance that with some of the, the virtual onlines and some of these events, even webinars where you can get together, it's really important to have a great balance. Anyone else on the panel that would like to respond?
Yeah, this is Joe. I'd like to add that, when it comes to content marketing, we've been doing some content marketing white papers and case studies for vendors, and I always want to encourage vendors to be really generous with the content they're providing. Vendors do some really interesting research on efficacy and what works in classrooms, and it doesn't always have to be couched in such an explicit marketing or promotional message. And I think educators are they're definitely paying attention to the vendors who are willing to just offer information to make their professional lives better versus those who are always hammering the product pitch.
Mm-hmm. Joe, I agree most definitely with that assessment. Yeah, I think definitely the product pitch is something that to initially go in with that, but to actually present some good, solid, like I said, our buyers are much more sophisticated. They have access to much more research than they really ever have before. And I think it's by being that provider, that thought leader, and establishing that, I think that goes a long way with them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I'll just read a comment that came across. Scott Hubert says, it comes down to building rapport. It's extremely difficult with all the various prospecting and lead generation activities to actually build rapport. His closing, he said my closing, percentage doubles if I can get a face-to-face. So that's a good point. And I'd like to move on to the next question. So Linda and Charlene, I'm going to throw this out to either whoever would like to respond first, but how can you best leverage your time at these events for the best return on investment?
Carmi, I think that's a big question because, and I don't think there's a best way, but I do think you have to look at a balance of things that you do on the show floor and things that you do off of the show floor, and how can you extend the time investment there. There are some conferences where strong but short theater presentations do really well in the booth, or pre-conference events or other kinds of events around the exhibit day, and sessions do really well. Some conferences, it is worth investing in paid vendor sessions. Sometimes it's worth doing a series of focus groups right along with that conference because you get great geodiversity. So I think the best way to leverage your time at events is to follow that same idea of a marketing mix, but it's a concentrated marketing mix at that event. And I think Charlene has some great ideas about ways to leverage the PR and visibility at events.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. I'd say that there's really kind of two things that would be at play here. And the first would be, all the activities that we do pre-conference to promote our presence. We're going to share with our customers, with our prospects, what we're going to be doing at the conference. We're going to social media photographs of ourselves prepping to go to the conference to build up that excitement. To follow on one of the questions that was raised in the chat here, if we've got a free book or a reward of some kind that we're going to be handing out at the booth, we want to create a process for people to do that so they don't just simply come past the booth to pick up the freebie and then walk away. What's going to be the thing that they're going to do with it? How are they going to log on? How are they going to create a relationship with us? So if it's a social media promotion, swing by the booth. We'll take a picture of you or send out a tweet of yourself in reference to something, and then come past the booth, and we'll hand over the item to you, and then we'll take a picture of you while you're there, and then you've created this continuum of conversation that's happening before the conference, during the conference, following a conference, and again, you've got not just a one-to-one relationship, that face-to-face connection that was mentioned that's so popular. You've actually got the photographic, if you will, evidence of all of that. So the only other thing that I can say to add to that would be that you just really need to fill your calendar. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, as the show floor closes, who you walk back to your hotel with I mean, there's just an unbelievable number of opportunities to connect with people and build that relationship. I always like to look at events at how many meetings or news releases or media conversations we've scheduled in advance, and then we count our return on investment based on what we got at the show and what we were able, if you will, to add in after the fact. Linda gave the specific reference of creating the news release to share what the news is that we're about to announce. Many of the conferences have newsrooms. They have press rooms that you can share this information with. They have a media list of who's covering the conference. EDUCAUSE, for example, in the higher education market was just last week in Anaheim, and there were an unbelievable number of media that were there and very willing to have conversations with vendors to learn what was new. And, of course, we're then going to ask questions about chatting with customers. But there are many, many ways to boost your presence at trade shows. The last thing that I would say is that we have to remember sometimes that trade shows don't always have to be those really large events, ISTE in K-12, EDUCAUSE in higher ed. Sometimes those smaller state and regional conferences offer slightly lower numbers of attendees, but an increased opportunity for the face-to-face connections. And so if, again, that return on investment is to move that relationship forward, think of small as the new big when evaluating your trade show strategies.
Thanks, Charlene. I always think that I'm pretty well, prepared, and I'm running around and doing a lot. But I don't think I've ever seen you sit down at a conference. So I know you're always.
And she never sleeps.
Yeah, she never sleeps. Neither do you, Linda. Okay, in the next, I'd say 10 minutes or 8 minutes, I'd like to take just so Karen will have some time. We'll have a little time for Q&A. Maybe 2 minutes each for the next 3 questions that we have. And Linda, I'm going to start with you. What's changing and or evolving in the media mix for marketing campaigns, and are there new options?
Carmi, I think really quickly that the media mix is definitely changing, but we're not throwing out some of the anchor components of that mix. There certainly are new options in terms of paid digital ads, everything from promoted tweets to some new roadblock and video options within publications venues. There are lots of exciting new things, but I still think it's the mix that matters the most. We want high performance components inside that mix, but it still is the mix that matters.
Thanks. Anyone else on the panel like to add to that? Okay, we'll go on. We'll probably spend a couple other extra minutes on the others. So, Linda, I guess back to you for the first responder here. What are some of the optimum best practices, the media mixes for the new product or new company launches at this time?
I think, and we have folks on the panel who can certainly speak to this as well. But I think we have powerful e-newsletters. And we find that e-newsletters tend to outperform website presence, with the exception of some of the new roadblocks and other things like that. There are some really interesting options that we are using for in-app and mobile and web retargeting messages here, particularly when we have a mix between educators and parents. I think those are some things that are pretty interesting. The use of video is also really, I think the last year and a half, we've seen it become far more powerful. And so when you mix that with sort of an anchor campaign that includes direct with email and print and lots of strong local and regional presence, and then some new and innovative things, I think it begins to give you a glimpse of what a new optimum campaign looks like. I'll also say you have to match that to the product, the price, and the promotion.
Thanks very much. Linda, do you feel, or anyone on the panel, that you might comment, are there any cost-effective guerrilla campaigning techniques that you've seen startups use? to get the attention of these administrators and educators?
I'll just say we've seen people show up at regional events. They don't exhibit at a conference, but they're all wearing, the new company's T-shirt. They register, they go to sessions, they meet, they talk. We've also seen some really interesting folks do projects on sites like Instructables, using materials that they're selling for school projects. It just runs the gamut. But there are a lot of inexpensive things you can do. It doesn't always take the huge budget, but it always takes the huge thought.
Mm-hmm. That's why it takes good marketing people in the know of these, because you know what works. You've been around enough in your you're 24 now, right, Linda?
Yes, at least.
And you know what works and what, especially with startups, right? Because I found just being with the innovations incubators and a mentor for many, it's a little bit intimidating going in as a startup. So, we've been fortunate with Karen's help to be able to maintain this mentorship program that we started a while ago, and we like getting it out there. So, and then I have our last question, and I'm going to open this up to whomever would like to speak first. So think ahead 5 years. How do you think companies will change the way they reach their customers 5 years from now? Just when we think we've done it all, right? Hardly.
I think there'll be new media in the mix, but I'm really curious to see what Charlene has to say.
Oh, I was going to say exactly that, Linda. I think that's spot on, and I think that we're going to continue to see an increase in mobile observation, mobile connecting, mobile engagement. Whether or not the sales move to mobile is going to, again, depend on price point, but we're definitely keeping a big eye on mobile.
I agree. Mobile. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say we're seeing the same thing, mobile, including apps, and I imagine you were probably going to say that as well, Mark.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. We're really focused in on mobile. We're really watching the AT&T and Sprint have done some tremendous studies showing that, I think 66% of CIOs in higher ed are actually using mobile tablets for one of their primary devices at work. I think one of the things so it's definitely that mobile market and that mobile media mix is definitely something that we're looking at.
I'd actually love to hear from some of the participants too, if any of the vendors have a thought on this.
Let's see. I have a couple comments here. Having a mix, Michael Campbell says, having a mix of social media PR promo pieces really drives the excitement along among educators. I'm going down. I'm just trying to read through some of these right now. And they may not be specific to this. I don't see any comments coming up yet. But
I think this is Karen, and certainly if you're thinking about post-secondary colleges, there's a lot of focus on reaching direct to the students because, you can. They have credit cards. It's a lot easier. Everybody's on social media, so I think that's one way that's happening. I think in K-12, if there's a way, one classic example of reaching educators through the kids, or not sort of both, is the old Scholastic Book Club model. While that was print-based, it gave, the teachers and students and parents were sort of this community for getting a number of books, having a lot of choice, having it be low cost. That worked for a long time.
Mm-hmm. I like Bruce's comment, and I think this is really important. I think it is changed. People like to, Bruce mentions permission-based marketing to the student. I think that it's kind of always been there, but I think as we move further and further and deeper into mobile delivery, we want to have, they're going to want to have a say in who gets to talk to them. So I think that's really, really important. So this brings us to the end and I think we have about 4 minutes. So we do have Q&A. I'll be looking at the chat box. If you do have a question in particular, please put a question mark, because I see a lot of, it's great to see so much chatting going on in the chat box here. But for our presenters, please do go ahead and put your questions in, and then I will hand the mic over to Karen.
Okay. So just as an FYI, our education intern, Jonathan, has been listening, taking notes. We have recorded it, so he's going to be able to go back and listen and then capture the highlights of these ideas, because I think they're some great ideas. This is an absolutely incredible group of people that came together and had thought through a lot of good questions and has provided us with a great deal of information. So it is it's a pleasure to have hosted this with essentially the 5 of you, and to remind you that very soon you're going to be getting, well, very soon, a day or 2 maybe, LaDuke will be sending you access to the slides and which come with the recording. So you may go ahead and share it with colleagues in your company. We also will be letting you know about the series every 2 weeks through, right now I think we're through February. We're going to be having these webinars. They're going to be very focused. And if you've got suggestions for webinars, please let me know. I would love to get some more ideas. I think actually in February we've got an opening. If you think you have something to contribute, and there are some people on here, I know, Bruce Wilcox helped on the very first one that we did. I think it was first one or second one. I know that Michael Campbell has some great ideas. Marjan, who's been active as more of an entrepreneur, probably has some great ideas. The folks from Atomic Learning, I see at trade shows, I see, are very active, and we're going to get them involved in some way. So stay tuned, and thank you again for your participation, both to our great set of panelists today. We really appreciate the time and the effort that you gave us, and to Carmi for keeping this conversation moving. It was a lot of information to get through in a little bit less than an hour, but you all did it. And to Charlene, Mark, and Joe, and Linda, thank you once more. And we'll hopefully see and hear most of you in 2 weeks' time.
Great. Thank you, Karen, and the SII team for making it so easy.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Please stand by.